Hey, what's up, everybody? BDR44 coming at you with another video. All right, so we talked a little bit about the Hawks just now. They made a trade with the Jazz to get Collins off of their books, and we kind of have a little more understanding of what was going on there. So what ended up happening, the reason why they were able to make the trade without the salaries necessarily matching is because there were trade exceptions that they could absorb Collins into that allowed for them to trade him for only $6 million in a second round pick. So that's how you see the salaries matching. You're like, how the hell did they make Rudy Gay at $6 million turn into that big old contract? Well, trade exceptions. Trade exception. They already had a $6 million trade exception. I think they probably had something else too to make that all come together. And the Hawks, because they were able to make this trade, were able to receive the biggest trade exception in the league right now. So the Hawks, coming into next season, will have $23 million trade exception to help absorb that. So you saw what $6 million did for the Jazz. Imagine what 23 can do when you have that sitting around just waiting to make trades at that value. I don't know if you could split that up. Let's say I want to trade for a guy at $15 million, maybe take 15 of that trade exception and have the rest. I don't know if it works that way, but nevertheless, you can see how very helpful big trade exceptions can be. I believe it was said that the Nets had an $18 million trade exception from the KD trade, and this one tops that. So the Hawks have the ability to go get them a very seriously talented player or a big, huge return that far exceeds anything that we're expecting to see. If for some reason they want to trade for a talented star, they got $23 million just waiting to divvy out on top of whatever it is they would rather turn away in creating flexibility. So that flexibility is massive for them. They can do pretty much anything. Now, the one thing that I look at in regards to the Hawks that's very interesting to me is their small forward position, because they have some mainstays in place. I didn't talk about Saddiq Bey, who's on the team. Also, DeAndre Hunter, and of course the guys that we did mention in Jalen Johnson and AJ Griffin. So that's four high-level small forward, power forward combination players that are going to need their playing time. And of course, they got DeJounte and Trae Young playing the point guard. And now we're talking about Kobe Buffkin coming in, Bogdanovich coming in, several other guards as well, including Lundy, they drafted. So they just don't, they have great depth, but the players they have in place are too much of mainstays to ever give the depth any real looks. When you got DeJounte going to get his 40 minutes a game, Trae going to get his 40 minutes a game, and then you got a logjam at the small forward. And even though you've removed Collins from the picture, you still got Okongwu in place. You still got Fernando, if I'm not mistaken. You still have Capella in place. So what they have is a logjam at just about every position. So that's really what it is. They're going to have to use that trade exception and take some of those small forwards and turn them into a more talented small forward. That's what they can do. They take DeAndre Hunter, 4 years, $20 million a year, match that with your trade exception and possibly flip him for a Jaylen Brown, or you can do a lot of stuff. You could flip him for Kevin Durant if you really want to do something crazy like that. They have the ability to take on a massive contract, and it only costs him $20 million worth of matching salary. So that's why the Hawks look interesting to me right now after making that trade. I don't know what their intentions are. Obviously, they got Trae Young and DeJounte Murray. So like I said, those are two starting point guards. But when you consider they gave up 4 picks to get that player, you can consider that $26 million as leverage that will allow them to kind of make up for that in some ways, and maybe even acquire some of those picks back. If for some reason they need that equity back, maybe they can acquire a Julius Randle and take on, you know what I mean, use the trade exception to get Juju, and then make the Knicks give you picks for taking back a contract like that. Or maybe they take on, you know, RJ Barrett or something like that and have the same type of situation. So that's what you want to see, is the Hawks get creative in trying to replenish all of the picks that they lost by way of that trade exception, and getting creative as possible to get themselves the future that they lost. And if they can do that, they'll be one of the most flexible teams in all of basketball. And so that's what I got to say about the Hawks, man. I think the future could potentially be bright, but you got to have the right people in place with the right imagination to be able to use that flexibility in order to maximize what it can be for their team. And if they do that, you can see the first NBA champion in Atlanta, just like you saw the first ring go to the the Nuggets just now and saw the Raptors get their first ring a couple years ago. It could be a trend. I don't think the Hawks are very close to a championship, but when I look at that trade exception, and I look at those two talented point guards, and I look at all the small forwards the team should want, it's not like they have a bunch of contracts that nobody wants. It's not like they have a bunch of stuff nobody would take a look at. You look at a guy like AJ Griffin, he's not getting the minutes. They could shop him for more than what he's worth, possibly get something for him if they feature him in the first half of the season. Might not be the worst idea. Keep Jalen Johnson. Maybe you got a chance to move Capella now with the trade exception. It gives you a lot more leverage to move on from a contract that you probably shouldn't want. So you like that's for them as well. At the end of the day, this is a team we're talking about, the Atlanta Hawks. With that type of flexibility, those type of talents, you can see them possibly putting themselves in a strong position and maybe have a chance of making the next super team happen for themselves, since they wanted to go gung-ho for DeJounte Murray and having Trae Young. Maybe they want to package all of what they have together and get them another third star, maybe do something special out there in Atlanta. But all in all, they have a nice combination of contracts on young, talented stars, high-level role players that should be covetable by other teams, and of course the trade exception that gives them flexibility that the picks missing ultimately can help replenish. So that's what I see in regards to the Hawks, man. From what I understand, they see Trae Young, DeJounte Murray, and more or less the individual Saddiq Bey. That's from what I understand they see as their mainstays. I didn't see anything mentioning DeAndre Hunter. In my mind, DeAndre Hunter, having been drafted just a few years ago by my very own Los Angeles Lakers, they paid him 4 years, I think $20 million a year. That's a little steep for him, given his injury history. But all in all, I think he can live up to that. And I think there's still upside from here. So even though he's been paid, this is a player that I think is not quite in the range of ruined because he was paid. It's more so just getting him in a regiment that gets the most out of him, get him to shake off these injury issues, and utilize what it is that he's very talented at, which is 3-level scoring. One of the more diversified choosers of shots that I've seen around the mid-range. This dude can hit from everywhere all the time, and when you study some of his college film, you will see that he really, really is a player that can pretty much get hot from all places on the court. And so when you consider that, I don't think they should be just willy-nilly ready to give away DeAndre Hunter just because they got Saddiq Bey. I don't know that Saddiq Bey is actually better than DeAndre Hunter in terms of upside. I don't think they're much different from one another. So that's what I got to say in regards to that. I just think that small forward position is a little tricky. That power forward position is tricky. Okongwu playing the 4 and 5 is comfortable for him, so it shouldn't be too much for him. But for them to try to make that make sense, but to be honest with you, I would rather condense that, turn that into a better player if possible, turn that into a higher quality star. I'd like to see Atlanta package a couple of them dudes together and try to see if they can pry Wagner from Orlando, maybe. That kind of thing would be what I'd want to do. Just turn DeAndre Hunter and one of them other small forwards into a better small forward. That's the key. But keep the timeline in place. That's why I probably should turn away from getting a vet like Tobias Harris, who's probably valued at that high based on what Philly's asking for, but never would I dare actually think that he's actually worth that. You see what I'm saying? Like, nah, he ain't actually worth that. It's just that what the price tag is on him. I want something that's actually worth that. Give me Mo Wagner, give me Bol, and I'll give you DeAndre Hunter and some of that, I don't know. You're not going to give me Bol, but you get the point. That's the type of thing I'm doing. Again, Rockets. You're another team that the Rockets should be interested in making trades with. And because they have younger talent themselves, it's not that they're giving away older guys. You can see your timeline still being nice with a guy like Green and Sengun if you swap Jae'Sean Tate and Josh Christopher for DeAndre Hunter or something. I don't know if that would be possible, but that's the type of thing that I think would be acceptable so long as the talent makes sense on both sides. You can get those type of young players away from Atlanta for even younger players from another team. So I'm starting to think teams are going to start doing that. Some of these teams, and we talked about a guy like Cade Cunningham with the Detroit Pistons. If anybody in Detroit feels the same way I do about Cade and probably would feel great about moving on from him, I would be shopping him to the teams that also have young talent that probably wouldn't mind getting rid of. For example, not to say that this is even, but depending on how you feel about these players, you may see this as a comparable type of thing. Kevin Porter Jr., Cade Cunningham. Not to say that I think Cade's on a higher level, But these are talking about young star guards that can be swapped for one another. That way, you don't feel like you're jumping out of your timeline or getting back garbage for your young player. Trade them for another young player that's got a similar situation. So that's possible now that you got all these teams. OKC can do a deal with the Houston Rockets, swap their kids for someone else that better fits what they want to do. Still high upside, still the same level player, just someone else's kids that fit better with me. So it's like that needs to happen now. Orlando, Houston, Detroit, OKC, all these teams with young players, they need to get the fits that match themselves. Instead of just having a hodgepodge of a bunch of young talent like they all do, they can swap with each other and find a good fit for each and every one of them. So that's what I think needs to happen. Teams like Utah, you got Agbaji. Maybe Detroit can do better with Agbaji. Maybe you need to be taking back something they got. That kind of thing, And that way, you take on Killian Hayes or something. I don't know. But the point is you don't have to give away young for old, and you don't have to be stuck with fits that don't work just because you got young players that probably shouldn't be traded. There's other teams that got young players that probably shouldn't be traded. That's who you trade with. So that's what I expect to see very soon. And that's why I think teams like the Clippers need to redo everything, blow it all up. Teams like the Lakers, blow it all up. Why? Because you want to get in that pot. Because those are the teams that are going to be willing to do deals with each other. They ain't going to want to do deals with you old teams that ain't got no picks. I'm telling you, you're going to be out the market. Or you're going to be overpaying for stuff and selling stuff for half the price. So that's why a lot of these teams that are in mid-man's lands, where they can't win nothing, and no man's land as they call it, they need to get out of no man's land so they could become trade partners with some of these teams that otherwise ain't going to pick up the phone. And so you may have a valuable piece, but it's a lot more valuable and a lot more flexible movement for you if you get off the old guy, the old Dame dude, and turn Dame into what his flexibility price tag would actually be, which is a bunch of picks, a bunch of players. It's easier to move that than Dame Lillard. You see what I'm saying? It's easier to work with that and pick from that and turn that into more instead of that big contract on that aging superstar. You know what I mean? It's not nothing to want. I don't care what nobody says. It's nothing to want in today's market. So that's how I feel about that. People talking about, Dame's coming to the Lakers. Not if I'm running things. No, I don't want that $64 million contract. No, send it to Houston. They got the young players and the flexibility. They can afford that. They can afford the blowback of that not turning into anything. I ain't taking that on if I ain't got the assets to make that make sense. And a lot of teams that want to do this never have it because the way they think, they're going to deplete themselves of those assets. This is why we teach the way we teach on this channel. So, yeah, that's what I had to say, man. Hopefully the Atlanta Hawks are taking notes in regards to what we're saying. We've addressed them a lot of the times. They never quite make the big move. They always have a deep team, but that team ain't never good enough to do nothing because they always lean on the wrong starters. That's what they did this last year. The people that they wanted to lean on, they probably should have been leaning on the guys behind them just as talented. So it's like that's what's wrong with Atlanta. They couldn't get the most out of their overall team. They got too much overlap, not enough balance. You need to turn some of them dudes and Clint Capella into a better center. Maybe they're a trade place. Phoenix. Now I found who can take Ayton. They can take Ayton. Atlanta can take Ayton. Atlanta can take Ayton. They got the exception to do it. They got the trade pieces to do it. They got a bunch of stuff that you need. And they shouldn't mind taking on Ayton for a plethora of reasons, including the fact that they probably have a better system from the running with DeJounte Murray getting them lobs, Trae Young doing teardrops. It's not really, it's a much better timeline than him running around with Katie and Bradley Beal now. He don't want to be there anyway. You're trying to find somebody who could take him. That trade exception looks really, really juicy. You can absorb that. Atlanta can absorb that without giving you talent. You don't want that. You actually want that talent. You actually want that talent. You don't want them to absorb that. You want them to take back. You want to take back more talent. You want to take back DeAndre Hunter. You want to take back Clint Capella. You want to take back Holiday on the back of that bench. Possibly Bogey. And I mean, I'm going to want all that stuff because at the end of the day, Atlanta ain't doing nothing with it, and I need depth. And I need to turn Ayton into depth, and I need somebody who's willing to do a deal with me on Ayton that ain't going to fleece me. Atlanta can afford to do that. Now, whether or not they see Ayton as somebody to bring in versus Capella, I don't know. But then again, I want to upgrade from Capella if I'm Atlanta. And if I'm at Phoenix, I want a center like Capella who ain't taking no shots away from those trio and who doesn't need his rhythm so they can be more of a focal point in the offense, which they're going to be anyway. That's why you're getting rid of Ayton, because you can't get the most out of Ayton. But Capella is exactly what you need. So this is why it makes sense. So, yeah, I think that's where they need to be shopping. I think those two teams should be having a conversation with one another right now. Atlanta's the squad for Ayton. Atlanta. There may be a better one, but Atlanta looks like the one that makes the most sense to me right now. I'm just putting that out there. So, yeah, that's what I got to say, man. That's where all this is taking me. Atlanta needs to do something with them small forwards. You don't need Bey, Hunter, AJ Griffin, Jalen Johnson, Lundy, all these dudes playing the same damn position. You can turn them 2 into 1 and get you a much better overall team while still keeping your depth, because you already got depth. You got, in fact, too much of it. So that's what I got to say about Atlanta, man. This is my second Atlanta Hawk video of the day. But since they made that John Collins trade, they're very intriguing, because now they have only 5 forwards to try to rotate and get the most out of, all of which could likely develop into starters. So, yeah, they got some things to consider right now, and hopefully they're on top of it. So that's what I got to say. Video 44. Thank you all for watching.